Okay, so let's just start with a really big question. What if? What if the reason you feel perpetually stuck, on that financial treadmill?
Right, that feeling of just running in place.
Exactly. What if that struggle, that exhaustion, has absolutely nothing to do with your discipline or your intelligence or, and this is a big one, how hard you're actually trying?
It's a huge question to open with because it reframes the whole problem, doesn't it?
It really does.
It suggests that maybe the problem isn't a personal failing at all.
Yeah.
What if the problem is, well, structural? Like a flaw that's just baked into the whole system of how we're taught to earn money.
That is the incredibly provocative question at the heart of the research we've been studying for this step dive. Because for too long, almost all mainstream financial advice has operated on one assumption.
That the individual's the problem.
Yes, that you are flawed. You know the drill, right? You need to budget better. You need to cut out the expensive daily coffee.
Oh, the coffee, always the coffee.
Or the old favorite.
Yeah.
You just need to hustle harder. You need to sacrifice more sleep.
But our sources suggest something. Something far deeper and more fundamental is at play here. There is, and I'm quoting, a fatal flaw baked into how most people are taught to make money.
A fatal flaw.
Yeah. This isn't about, minor behavioral tweaks. This is about recognizing that the dominant income model we all use is structurally designed to guarantee fragility. It's an outdated piece of architecture that maximizes your effort, but minimizes your resilience.
Okay, let's unpack this. This is a monumental shift in perspective. So we welcome you to this deep dive. And our focus today is on dismantling a core, almost sacred assumption.
The one that says linear, continuous effort automatically equals sustainable income.
Exactly. Our mission today is to explore why holding on to that belief quietly guarantees burnout, it guarantees fragility in your financial life, and ultimately it just guarantees stalled, nonlinear growth.
And the central conflict, as defined by the analysis we reviewed, is just. It's crucial. Hustle is a strategy for survival, not for freedom.
Survival, not freedom.
Right. So we're exploring this concept of designing resilient wealth, which really means shifting your focus from constantly chasing the next paycheck, which is a tactical game, to strategically designing an income architecture.
An architecture that supports freedom rather than one that's constantly just draining your finite physical and mental resources.
Exactly.
And I think we have to start by defining the problem with clinical precision. Let's get into the design error in section 1. It's known as time-based income, or TBI, and the sources label it pretty harshly as a dead end by design. So let's talk about the model most of us know, time-based income, TBI.
Right. It's what we're all taught. It feels normal.
It feels totally intuitive. You give an hour of your life, your skill, your presence.
And you get a fixed amount of money back. Simple.
Exactly. But the sources we looked at argue that the very moment your income depends on you physically or even virtually showing up.
The whole thing becomes fragile.
Terrifyingly fragile. And this is where we really need to spend some time, because that fragility isn't some abstract theoretical thing.
No, it's an immediate consequence of the design itself.
Yeah.
The sources we looked at break this down into 3 unavoidable structural limitations that TBI imposes on you.
And this is regardless of your skill level or even how much you earn per hour.
Right. It doesn't matter.
The first, and I think the most obvious limitation, is the cap.
Mm-hmm.
You are strictly, unbreakably capped by the finite nature of time. It doesn't matter if you're earning minimum wage or you're a high-end consultant billing $1,000 an hour.
You still only have 24 hours in a day.
Right. Even if you push yourself to the absolute biological limit, what can you do? Maybe squeeze out 14, 16 working hours a day.
And that's if you skip sleep and eating properly and any kind of recovery. The constraint is ironclad. You cannot physically multiply your hours.
So your potential income ceiling is fixed. And when you compare it to true wealth generation, which has to be nonlinear, it's actually pretty low.
Mm-hmm. Well, think about it, even for those high-skill workers you mentioned. Partners in law firms, specialized medical consultants, they earn a lot per hour, but they're still fundamentally trapped by this.
How so?
To earn more, they must bill more hours. That's the only lever they have.
Yeah.
Which just pushes them closer and closer to that 24-hour limit, that hard biological wall.
And that fixed cap then directly feeds into the second limitation, which is the exposure.
Yes.
You are maximally vulnerable to burnout because the only mathematically viable way to increase your income inside that TBI box is to just push closer to the time limit.
You're essentially trading your core biological asset, your time and your health, for these tiny incremental income gains.
We see that exposure show up not just as, physical exhaustion, but as this chronic low-grade anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. Because your income is directly tied to your physical presence and your continuous high performance.
Right.
Any dip in energy and focus, even just in your mood, it becomes a direct financial threat.
This trade-off, constantly increasing your stress while decreasing your rest, is the inevitable outcome. You're trying to scale an unscalable resource, your time.
The system is built to extract the maximum finite input from you.
And then finally, that leads to the third limitation, interruption. This is the fragility point.
This is the breaking point.
If you, the individual, are the single point of failure in your own financial system, then anything that interrupts your presence.
Anything. An external crisis like a pandemic, your computer failing.
Or just the totally inevitable personal health event, a broken leg, the flu.
Your income stream is immediately cut off, or at the very least, it's severely damaged.
And the sources we read have this incredible phrase for this situation. They don't call it financial security. They call it dependency dressed up as stability.
And that framing is so important for you to internalize. We are conditioned from day one to believe that a fixed biweekly paycheck is the definition of stability.
It feels stable.
It feels stable, but the truth is, you are entirely dependent. You're dependent on that employer staying in business, dependent on that client continuing to pay you, and most critically,
you're dependent on the continuous, uninterrupted function of your own body, your schedule, your presence.
Dependency dressed up as stability. It's powerful because it exposes the illusion. That predictable paycheck gives you a false sense of security.
And so we accept the massive dependence that comes with it. We're accepting a structure that offers zero, absolutely zero, resilience against the unexpected.
If you stop working for any reason, let's say you just decide to take a 6-month sabbatical, the whole thing collapses.
Because it was only ever designed to survive your presence.
Right. And this leads us to the crucial historical question we have to ask. Why? Why does this fundamentally flawed model persist, even though the world has moved on into the information age, the global age, the AI age?
And the answer is that TBI is a leftover. It's a relic from the industrial era, and it persists because it serves the traditional system that adopted it.
Exactly. I mean, when the Industrial Revolution needed people to physically stand on assembly lines or operate machines, it made perfect sense to pay for the time you were physically present.
It was designed for industrial era efficiency. It allowed management to budget labor costs down to the penny.
And here's the insidious part. It was designed for standardization and for management control. The system valued the input, the time over the output, the value you delivered.
Because the output was standardized. A widget is a widget.
And since the workers were often just meant to be replaceable cogs in the machine, the system had no incentive whatsoever to make the worker resilient or independent.
In fact, it had the opposite incentive.
It had the opposite incentive. Keep the worker dependent on the continuous system.
The world evolved, skills became specialized, value generation became exponential. But the underlying income architecture is still stuck in, 1890?
Pretty much. And if the system hasn't adapted to value your uniquely leveraged output, well, then you have to adapt.
And that's what forces you into the next destructive cycle. Hustle culture.
Okay, so if TBI puts a hard cap on your income and you want more income, and let's be honest, who doesn't? The only immediate linear solution inside that broken framework is to hustle.
Right. You just have to run faster.
But the analysis we reviewed makes it brutally clear. The math just doesn't work out.
And this is where we really need to dissect the exhaustion that so many people feel. The core failure of the hustle mindset is that it asks a finite human being to compete with infinite demand.
Infinite demand.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. The market's demand for more productivity, for new product releases, for constant availability, for optimization. It is absolutely endless. It accelerates every single day.
But your ability to supply that, it slams right into that 24-hour physical time limit we just talked about.
It's an equation that is destined for failure. Since your hours are fixed, the only immediate solutions hustle culture can offer are, work more hours.
Or increase your stress levels to try and squeeze more productivity into those already fixed hours. But the most destructive option, the one that's often subconsciously promoted, is to trade health for income.
Let's really dwell on that trade-off for a second.
Yeah.
We're talking about trading your most crucial assets like sleep, mental clarity, physical exercise, social connection.
All for an incremental, linear increase in pay. The sources describe this as a trade you make until there is nothing left to trade.
Wow.
You literally deplete the fundamental assets you need for a resilient, sustainable life, your health and your sanity, just to service a flawed income structure that prevents you from ever truly scaling.
So you're constantly drawing down your capital reserves, which is your energy, just to pay for an inefficient operating budget, which is your income.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this leads us to the critical psychological analysis of hustle.
Okay.
Hustle culture, the sources point out, functions less as genuine motivation and more as strategic conditioning.
What do you mean by conditioning?
The material suggests its main purpose is to shift the blame away from the systems that rely on TBI, the employers, the clients, the whole financial structure, and put it squarely onto the individual, who is inevitably failing to thrive within those limitations.
I see. So it's not the game that's rigged, it's you. You're just not playing hard enough.
Exactly. Think about the narrative that permeates so much business culture and motivational content. If you're tired, you're weak. If you're stuck, you didn't try hard enough. If you can't make it work.
You must be lazy or undisciplined.
Right. This narrative is so pervasive, and it places the entire burden of failure, exhaustion, and stagnation on the personal character of the worker.
And the author's conclusion here is piercing. It says, this narrative protects the system by exhausting the person.
That's it. We become so deeply focused on trying to fix our own perceived lack of discipline, believing we just need one more productivity hack,
that we never stop to question the fundamental design of the income model itself, which is the actual problem. We internalize the flaw instead of challenging the structure.
And this exhausting, blame-shifting cycle creates an even deeper psychological wound, which our sources call identity fusion.
Identity fusion. Okay, what is that?
It's the state where your earning becomes inextricably linked to and inseparable from your self-worth.
This is where it gets painful.
This is the aha moment that can be really uncomfortable. When your income equals your identity, the psychological consequences are devastating. Crucial activities that you need for long-term sustainability, they get actively penalized.
Take rest, for example.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
Rest is no longer restorative. It creates profound guilt. Because in your fused mind, if you're resting, you're not earning. And if you're not earning, you are not worthy.
So the simple act of self-care triggers financial and existential panic.
Exactly. And the fear of slowing down, even when it's necessary for strategic planning or deep work or just recovery, it becomes immense. If your self-worth is tied to constant visible motion, that hustle, then stopping feels like a catastrophic existential risk.
The moment the linear input stops, the self-worth gauge just drops to zero.
Right. And this fear also sabotages your ability to grow or reinvent yourself. Reinvention is absolutely necessary in a fast-changing world, but it requires a temporary pause or a detour in your known income flow. It requires uncertainty.
If your identity is tied to your current income stream, then reinvention feels incredibly dangerous. It jeopardizes your immediate perceived self-worth.
This is precisely why the source defines this state not as genuine constructive ambition, but as psychological captivity.
You're a prisoner of your own definition of success.
You're trapped, not by external economic bars, though those are real, but by an internal conditioned definition of self-worth that is entirely dependent on continuous, finite, and ultimately unsustainable effort. You are forced to choose between your profitability and your psychological health every single day.
I think we need to spend a moment on the paradox that keeps people trapped, even when they intellectually know this is miserable.
The behavioral economics of it all.
Yeah, we so often choose what is familiar over what might actually bring us freedom or happiness. The source calls this the comfort of predictable stress.
It sounds counterintuitive, but it's profoundly human. The argument is that people often choose familiarity over happiness because, and this is another quote, known stress feels safer than unknown freedom.
Say more about that.
Well, the stress of the daily grind, the 60-hour weeks, the missed meals, the constant exhaustion, it's predictable. You know exactly what those long hours feel like. You know what the guilt tastes like. You know the exact mechanism of your own misery. It's a familiar landscape.
But the leap toward change, toward designing a completely new structure for resilient income, that requires stepping into the unknown.
The abyss of the unknown.
Yeah.
It involves risk, the high probability of temporary failure, and a period of financial instability that your mind, which has been conditioned by years of TBI and identity fusion, is screaming at you to avoid.
So your brain perceives the uncertainty of freedom as a greater, more dangerous threat than the predictable stress of your current miserable situation.
Precisely. You may hate the job, but you know that next paycheck is coming. That known quantity provides a psychological anchor. Breaking free means risking that anchor.
And for someone whose identity is fused with that income, That risk is terrifying.
This choice-known stress over unknown freedom is the final psychological mechanism that guarantees the TBI flaw persists, even after you intellectually see it.
So you need a structural, actionable strategy to overcome that psychological barrier.
You do. And that strategy starts with shifting away from raw effort and towards structured leverage.
So if the problem is structural, if TBI is this outdated machine built for dependency, then the solution has to be structural too.
Right. You can't solve the design problem with more effort. You solve it with a better design.
We're moving into the solution space now. And the first step, as the analysis advises, is to clear up a major misconception. When we critique the endless grind of hustle, people often assume the alternative we're proposing is, well, laziness.
And the source material is unequivocal here. The opposite of hustle is not laziness. It is leverage.
That's the key. That is the foundational definition we have to adopt.
Leverage is the mechanism that allows you to amplify your output, the value you deliver to the market, far beyond your finite input of time.
Let's use a tangible analogy here to make this really stick for everyone. Hustle is like running faster and faster on a treadmill. You're trying to increase your hourly velocity, but you're still fundamentally running in place. Leverage, on the other hand, is stepping off that treadmill entirely and designing a self-driving, highly optimized car.
I like that.
It's a fundamental change in the vehicle you use to move through the world. You're not trying to run harder, you're automating the movement and decoupling it from your legs.
And that strategic shift introduces the core philosophy for achieving resilient wealth. The goal has to shift decisively from doing more to designing better.
The effort you expend is no longer the metric of success.
No, the quality and the resilience of your income architecture, that's the new metric.
This means the future of sustainable, non-fragile income belongs to those who design income, not to those who chase it.
And when you start to make this shift, the analysis suggests 3 major outcomes immediately begin to materialize. And they directly counter that TBI trap we talked about.
Okay, what are they?
First, your work becomes strategic, not just tactical. Second, your money becomes resilient, not just predictable. And third, and this is critical, your life becomes sustainable rather than constantly draining.
Because you're focusing your finite time on high leverage activities, designing the car, rather than high effort, low leverage activities like running on the treadmill.
Exactly. And this provides a clear, new guiding question that you, the listener, need to adopt immediately. It replaces the old destructive metric of TBI.
The old question was, how hard can you work? That's the linear, finite, hustle era question that keeps you trapped.
The new metric, the question of what we can call the leverage age, is how well is your income designed to survive without you?
That is such a powerful reframe.
That resilience factor is the true measure of wealth design. If your entire income collapses the moment you stop showing up, it is not resilient wealth. It is still maximum dependency, even if the dollar amount you earn is high.
So this new question is a direct challenge to the cap and the exposure limitations of TBI. It forces you to build structures that are interruption-proof by design.
Now, hold on. This all sounds fantastic, but let's introduce a common counterpoint, a critique that I'm sure our sources address.
Okay, go for it.
A lot of people would argue that using these pillars we're about to discuss, media, systems, ownership, that it requires significant starting capital or highly specialized technical knowledge or an existing influence that most people just don't have.
Right. Is the source material acknowledging that for many, TBI is the only feasible starting point? We can't just skip the initial grind entirely, can we?
That is a critical point that needs nuance.
Yeah.
And yes, the sources absolutely acknowledge that TBI is the necessary entry point for most people. But they make a crucial distinction between the necessary grind and the perpetual, pointless grind. The person who successfully transitions uses their TBI as a funding mechanism to build leverage. They don't use it as an identity.
So they treat their TBI income as seed capital, not as the ultimate destination.
Exactly. The goal isn't to avoid the grind, but to make the grind strategic. You grind specifically to fund the first pillar of leverage, buying the software system, building the website, or taking 10 hours of that billable time and diverting it toward creating an intellectual property asset.
And what about the capital argument? That you need a lot of money to start.
Well, contrary to that idea, modern technology, the internet, low-code platforms, social media for distribution has dramatically lowered the entry barrier to the first 3 pillars. You don't need a factory to leverage media, you need a laptop. You don't need millions to leverage a system. You can use existing software as a service tools to automate your logistics.
So the crucial investment isn't capital, it's the strategic use of your time to design the system.
Precisely. But we do still need to inject that necessary note of caution from the source material.
Okay.
Simply seeing the flaw, just achieving that intellectual awareness of the TBI trap, that doesn't fix it. If you recognize the psychological and mathematical traps, but you fail to actually build the escape route, awareness becomes a problem in itself.
How so?
The research states it clearly. Without committing to building a new income architecture, that is, without actively implementing leverage awareness, just transforms into frustration.
So you see the prison walls, you know you're captured by identity fusion, but you don't have the practical tools or the psychological resilience to actually change the structure.
Right. And that gap, the gap between your intellectual freedom and your practical captivity, is why the material labels frustration as a new prison.
It's an agonizing space to be in, knowing what you should be doing, but constantly falling back into that predictable stress because you haven't yet built a structure that's resilient enough to sustain the leap.
So the pivot requires committed action. It requires designing the architecture with intention. We need to move beyond theory and define the specific, tangible mechanisms that allow us to decouple income from time.
Which brings us to the actual blueprints for building nonlinear wealth.
Okay, so if leverage is the opposite of hustle, we need to know how to build it. We're getting into the engineering phase now.
The blueprint.
Exactly. The source material details 4 specific pillars that, when you combine them, allow a creator to achieve the goal of earn once, distribute many times.
And these are the drivers of nonlinear growth that finally break that TBI cap.
Let's break down these 4 pillars of leverage. They form the modern blueprint for resilience.
Okay, first up, there is media.
Right. This is leverage generated through content creation and information scaling. The key insight here is that information, unlike your time, is not a finite resource. If you spend 50 hours writing a detailed proprietary framework or producing a high-value educational series,
that single act of creation can be consumed by thousands or even millions of people indefinitely.
And a great example isn't just, a general YouTube video. Think about a former industry expert who creates a proprietary certification program based on their years of deep experience.
So they capture their specific, unique knowledge, that's the earn once phase, into a structured system, which I guess overlaps with the next pillar.
It does. And every single enrollment after that requires 0 additional input time from the expert, yet it delivers immense value to the consumer. Media turns your knowledge into a scalable asset.
Okay, so next we have systems. This refers to automated processes that perform tasks without requiring your continuous presence or attention.
This is where you replace repetitive human effort with reliable, scalable automation.
Systems are the crucial link that can transform your media into actual money, right?
They are. And a generic example is just a checklist. But for this deep dive, we need to think bigger. Think of sophisticated, automated marketing funnels that capture leads, nurture them with sequenced content, and process sales without any human intervention.
Or in a B2B context, it could be complex data analysis pipelines or outsourced logistical systems like fulfillment houses that operate on protocols you designed one time.
A system is essentially a digital or an outsourced operational employee that works 24/7. It doesn't need to be paid an hourly wage, and it never needs to sleep.
Okay, third pillar is ownership. This is the classic form of resilient wealth, but we need to expand the definition a bit, right? It's not just about owning a few stocks.
Right. Ownership means owning assets that generate value independent of your operational time or effort.
This includes the financial assets we know, like investment portfolios, real estate, or venture capital stakes.
But the high leverage ownership in the modern economy is often intellectual property, or IP.
So what does that look like?
Think of owning a proprietary algorithm, a patented design, a unique brand, or a code base that performs a high-value function. When you own the engine, the IP, you capture the recurring revenue generated by that engine, even if you were on vacation for a month.
You own the mechanism for value creation itself, not just the time you spend fueling it.
That's the key distinction.
And finally, the fourth pillar, which is often the most misunderstood and sometimes the most powerful, distribution.
This is the ability to reach a massive targeted audience efficiently. Having world-class content, your media, and a flawlessly automated process, your system, is functionally useless if you can't get it reliably into the hands of the people who need it.
So distribution is the multiplier.
It is the ultimate multiplier. It's what ensures that the value you created once, the earn once phase, can be efficiently delivered to the distribute many times phase.
And we're talking about things like leveraging network effects, optimizing for search engine optimization, SEO, so the system runs itself.
Or building strategic partnerships that give you instant access to audiences you could never build manually, one person at a time. Distribution determines the scope of your leverage.
Okay, so let's connect these 4 pillars back to the concept of nonlinear growth. We know effort is linear and finite. If you want 10% more income from TBI, you have to apply 10% more effort or time. That input-output relationship is fixed and fragile.
But influence and leverage scale non-linearly. The key insight here is that when you build leverage, the value compounds. We can state this really simply. Trust scales. Authority compounds. Content multiplies.
Effort, by contrast,
does not scale.
When you dedicate time to building trust through your media, say publishing a detailed white paper or a transparent case study, you aren't just building trust one-to-one.
No, you're building it one-to-many through your distribution channels. The effort you put into earning the trust of 1,000 readers today benefits every single future transaction you have with those 1,000 readers.
Right.
And every person they refer to you. It snowballs.
It's exponential.
And authority compounds, particularly when you build systems and ownership. Every successful proprietary system you build, every valuable piece of IP you create, it adds to your overall perceived authority in a way that is multiplicative, not merely additive.
So let's look at the math there.
Okay? If you work 10 hours for a client, you only get paid once for those 10 hours. Simple. But if you spend 10 hours creating a proprietary system that saves 100 potential clients 1 hour each, you have now created 100 hours of market value from just 10 hours of your finite input.
That's the definition of compounding.
That's leverage. And the ultimate synthesis here is how these 4 pillars interact to finally solve the structural problem of TBI.
Let's go back to that high-end graphic designer we mentioned earlier, the one who got sick. If they're reliant on TBI, they starve.
But if they had strategically combined the 4 pillars, the architecture would hold up. Let's say they use their billable TBI, their survival income, to fund the creation of a specialized library of digital design assets.
So that's media and ownership right there.
Exactly. Then they set up an automated e-commerce site to sell these assets.
Systems.
And they drove traffic to that site using search advertising and social networks.
Distribution.
So when they get sick, the income survives the interruption. The systems are running, the media is being consumed, and the ownership is generating returns, all completely independent of their physical presence.
That is the practical realization of true resilient wealth. It's fundamentally decoupled from the fragility of time-based income.
It's the essential move from being the skilled but also essential and breakable component in the machine
to being the architect of the machine itself.
And that shift in identity from continuous laborer to designer of systems is the only way to achieve sustainable financial and psychological freedom, rather than just perpetually striving for survival inside a structurally flawed model. Hashtag tag outro.
So we have taken this deep dive from the diagnosis of the structural flaw, that outdated industrial age model of time-based income, all the way through the psychological traps of identity fusion.
And finally, to the specific blueprints for building resilience using those 4 pillars of leverage.
We've established that hustle, while it's often celebrated in our culture, is really just a strategy for survival. And it's mathematically doomed to result in burnout and stagnation because it fights against the finite nature of time.
And we're not arguing that initial hard work is evil or bad. The analysis simply notes that hustle is, quote, just outdated as a long-term wealth strategy. It's a tool that was designed for a bygone era, and trying to use it today just guarantees exhaustion.
The critical shift for you, the listener, to internalize is that true value and freedom are found not in working harder within that flawed system,
but in deliberately stepping back and designing a completely new system and architecture where your income and your finite effort are decisively decoupled.
Let's try to ground this with one final tangible example before we close out. If you are an accountant who relies on TBI,
designing resilience doesn't mean billing 80 hours a week. It means spending 10 of those hours creating a robust, standardized tax preparation system, that's systems and ownership, that you can then license digitally, media and distribution, to 50 small firms every single year.
That's the practical, strategic move from time-based income to designed income.
It is.
So the final takeaway for you is a shift in your core internal metric. Stop tracking the hours you worked. Stop tracking your input. start tracking the value generated that survives your absence.
That is the ultimate metric of resilient wealth design. And it's the antidote to that identity fusion we talked about.
And that leads us to our provocative closing thought, which is designed to give you a blueprint for your next design project.
If you had to take an unplanned 6-month break tomorrow, how well would your current income architecture hold up?
That answer isn't meant to be a source of guilt or panic. It's a clinical diagnostic tool. If the answer is not well at all, then your mission now is clear.
Use that information as the precise blueprint to design the durability your life deserves. What leverage, pillar media, systems, ownership, or distribution can you start building first to ensure that next time your income outlives your inevitable absence?
That's where the real strategic work begins.